Hey guys, I know I'm a bit late, but thank you so much to everyone for getting me to 100 subscribers on YouTube so quickly. I am deeply appreciative to everyone who watched any of the videos I've made thus far, and I hope I can continue providing some, if not fun, then at least interesting content to fill your homepages with. Thank you again everyone, and please enjoy this recounting of my playthrough of the Dark Pictures Anthology, The House of Ashes. Are you tired of boring video games with no stakes, risks or consequences? Are you bored with the mind-numbing, colourful violence of Valorant, Overwatch and Fortnite? And do you also find yourself scrolling through Steam, PlayStation or Microsoft stores endlessly, searching for something that will trigger the release of dopamine you've been chasing for oh so very long? Don't even worry. Just Chatting has got your back. Look no further than the Dark Pictures Anthology. The simplest and most accurate way to describe this episodic horror series would be to imagine a quality horror film, if those exist anymore, and combine it with the exciting button pressing of Guitar Hero and Dance Dance Revolution. Now that the first season of the Dark Pictures Anthology games has come to a conclusion with the fourth game in the series, The Devil Inside, I thought I'd make a video about each of the games in the series, detailing why I reckon games where I, the player, am in control over the outcomes that occur within the narrative are triple S tier. Okay, enough introduction. In no particular order, let's begin the exploration into our first spooky adrenaline-filled adventure, which is the Dark Pictures Anthology, The House of Ashes. Our story begins 2,231 years before the birth of our Lord, Jesus Christ, within the walls of an Akkadian temple, nestled right in the middle of the scorching hot Arabian desert. We open to an Akkadian general named Balathu, who is very busy sacrificing captive Gutian soldiers at the request of his king in order to lift a curse, which the same king brought upon them by being very naughty and sacking a different temple at the city of Nippur. The lucky man who's next in line to get his head removed is called Kurum, a Gutian soldier who clearly has some reservations about getting the chop. Bing bang boom boom, fate steps in and saves his precious neck for the time being, as the king has summoned Balathu to have a nice little chat about how all the bad stuff that's been happening to them is all the king's fault, and now the plague and famine outside the temple is the doing of the cheeky moon god.
The Gutians are coming, General. The moon god sends an army to destroy us.
Anyway, Balathu shows off how good he is at javelin, and then hops off to the battle outside the temple to nourish the sands with the blood of their enemies. Meanwhile, a solar eclipse happens, which in turn causes something ancient and spooky to move around in the tunnels below the temple, and they make very spooky, screechy noises. Also, Kurum has escaped his captors and roams the palace in order to seek out the Akkadian king to give him a stabby gift. But to his surprise, everyone in the temple has already been slaughtered, and it appears that only Balathu the general and Kurum the Gutian themselves are the sole survivors. Although hostile to begin with, the unlikely pair of enemies quickly find themselves putting their differences aside in the face of the screeching horrors trying to break into the temple. Kurum and Balathu head down to the catacombs to seek an alternate exit away from the clawed horrors, and here the pair officially become best buds.
The enemy of my enemy
is a friend.
We help each other.
It's here that they realize there is nowhere to run, and they must stand and fight together if they are to have a chance against the demons. The warrior pair fend off one of the horrors while getting wounded in the process. Kurum's body gets dragged away by the demon claws, while Balathu is the last man standing before he too gets overwhelmed by the demons. At this point, this is where we get the coolest introduction to any horror game I have ever seen, and that's watching the mysterious curator who's voiced and motion captured by Pip Torrens, the most evil-looking, hardest motherfucker in the horror business. The curator, as his name is, serves as a chronicler who will check in with us the player from time to time to give us some hints or perhaps taunt us if we'd done goofed up a decision or perhaps made a good one. Regardless, he's mysterious, manipulative, and I love him to death. Emphasis on death. We enter the main act of the narrative, plunging headfirst into Saddam Hussein's palace at the beginning of the Iraq War in the year 2003. Here, we're introduced to the first two puppets, whose fates we will be responsible for, and they are First Lieutenant Jason Kolchak, who is confident and intolerant, and then we have Lieutenant Eric Colonel King, who is rational and insecure. Also, along for the ride is Eric's assistant, Dr. Clarice Stokes. As the trio make their way to the briefing room to do some very important briefing, we jump scenes to the next two characters, who we will be using as our marionettes for this game, as they are Sergeant Nick Kay, who is defensive and romantic, and he has got his kissy lips all over the face of CIA field officer Rachel King, estranged wife of Colonel King, who is commanding and abrasive. She and Nick have been seeing each other while Eric has been away working on his super secret thermal satellite imaging project codenamed Kalis. Here, Nick implores Rachel to come clean to her husband and officially break off their marriage. But Rachel says, yep, definitely gonna do that real soon, my little Marine buddy boy. Meanwhile, during Eric, Jason, and Clarice's walk to the briefing room, we meet two more Marines, Merwin, who loves to make your mama jokes, and Joey, who is so vanilla, I can't even think of anything special to say about him other than the fact that he wears glasses. So the gang all meet up in the briefing room and Eric and Rachel reunite, with Rachel choosing to give Eric a nice cold reception while conveniently not telling him that she's sleeping with Nick, which would make Colonel King Colonel Cuck.
You clear it with me first.
So, more chit-chat is happening, and finally Eric gives us the mission brief, which is to investigate a big underground cavern, which Eric's satellite has found, leading them to suspect it of being the location of a storehouse containing those chemical weapons that Saddam definitely had tucked away. Eric waves a note from his mum around, which gives him the lead on the mission over Rachel, and this causes tension. Dun dun dun. Anyway, the gang is hyped to go suss out these weapons, and Eric chooses not to bring extra air support so that they have the element of surprise, and he also overlooks Jason bringing white phosphorus grenade shells without prior authorization. Finally, we cut to the last blessed soul who we will have the responsibility to take care of, and his name is Lieutenant Salim Othman, an Iraqi soldier who is stubborn and courageous. With a birthday gift for his son Zayn in hand, he waltzes home to find his son absent, and Salim also finds some stolen goods under Zayn's bed, which makes him a little miffed. Salim's train of thought is interrupted, however, when his commanding officer, Captain Dar, shows up outside his house, saying, "Hey Salim, come on, we gotta go kill the American pig invaders, come on." And Salim is hesitant, as he knows the war is over for them, but Dar gives him no choice in the matter, and so the pair, along with a group of Iraqi soldiers, embark on a mission to intercept the Yankees, landing at the suspected weapons bunker. Next scene, the Americans are flying into a remote desert village, exchanging several witty yo mama jokes.
Hey Merwin, what's your mama and the Bermuda Triangle have in common?
Why are you fucking it like?
They both swallow Marines.
Yeah, that's pretty good, boy.
Before busting up the village and assaulting the buildings, capturing Iraqi citizens who claim to be shepherds, who know nothing of a weapons bunker. With 0 casualties, the area is secured, and Rachel flexes her Arabic knowledge while questioning the farmhands. At the same time, Salim, Dar, and the rest of the Republican Guard, who are lying in wait, blow a chopper right out of the sky and unleash a surprise ambush on the Americans. There's a fierce gun battle during which Vanilla Joey is shot in the gut and dies in Nick's arms. Meanwhile, during the chaos, Salim sneaks up behind Jason and watches him to see if he guns down a civilian who ignores his request to surrender. Jason chooses not to shoot the unarmed shepherd in the back, and Salim gives him a big thumbs up, while also declaring that they are done fighting. Eric proceeds to tempt fate by pulling a robot chicken Palpatine and saying,
Hey, wanna see me tempt fate? Could this day get any worse? I did it ironically, so I think I'm safe.
This get any worse?
Seconds later, seconds, the earth beneath their very feet begins to shake, revealing to us the ruins of the ancient temple from the prologue. The big gaping holes in the earth swallow up our 5 protagonists, as well as Clarice, Merwin, and Salim's Captain Dar. The next scene opens with Sergeant Nick Kay getting up from his tumble, calling out for his fellow Marine Jason. Nick sees some fast-moving shadows while walking through the cave tunnels before linking up with Jason. I should also mention that due to an incident that occurred a couple weeks predating the weapon silo mission, Nick and Jason were manning a civilian military checkpoint watching for suicide bombers, and on Jason's orders, Nick shot and killed a civilian woman they suspected of holding a bag with a bomb in it. Sadly, she only had groceries in her bag, and Nick spaces out from time to time, feeling guilty. Jason and Nick continue walking through the ruins and suddenly hear Merwin's voice screaming nearby. They run to investigate, only to find Clarice trying to help Merwin, who's dangling from the surface from some barbed wire, which has also cut him up real bad. Jason cuts Merwin down and searches for morphine in his pack, when suddenly Clarice gets snatched up by something into the darkness, and the trio are fallen upon by the shrieking creatures. Merwin is bleeding out and screaming loud as fuck, and Jason and Nick realize they won't survive if they have to drag Merwin's bleeding ass with them, so they finally give him the morphine and he shuts up. Now we cut to Salim, who tries and fails to contact Captain Dar on his radio, and so starts making his way through the ruins. He stumbles upon a bloody, disfigured corpse and hears noises in a distant hallway. He loses his rifle, making a jump following a small shake. He eventually encounters one of the monsters and proceeds to hightail it back the way he came, and during another aftershock, a big-ass truck falls through the surface and crushes the demon chasing him. He laughs triumphantly. Eric and Rachel are with us now in the next sequence, where Eric notices that Rachel is holding a US military issue lighter on her, and he thinks that's kinda sus, since she doesn't smoke. They rappel further down into the ruins and find the ancient throne room, and they're puzzled to find that there is a post-World War II archaeological camp already set up with equipment in the chamber. They discover a journal entry belonging to a man named Randolph. On the page, Randolph describes that he, alongside his wife Mary, were summoned to lead an expedition to the dig site by a wealthy antiquarian known as Lady Bradshaw, and that they were told that the site could potentially be the burial chamber of Alexander the Great. Eric and Rachel find an old diesel generator and get it up and running, all while exchanging a few words which hint at a possible rekindling of their exhausted marriage.
I missed you too, Eric. How could I not?
As the couple continue exploring the archaeological equipment left behind from 1946, they stumble upon a tape recording machine. They rewind the tape, and just before they hit play, they exchange some words which lead Eric to the conclusion that he is indeed being cheated on. But before he can force the issue, the menacing recording begins to play.
The bones of this temple are drenched in blood. We have set foot on an uncharted shore and roused something ancient and wicked. A blasphemy that comes in indescribable shapes and forms. For eons we lived as children in this world, unaware of the horrors that slumber beneath our feet. Now we have blindly thrown open the gates to madness. I fear being taken, but I must do what I must. We must seal this place for eternity, for all mankind. Mary, I'm sorry.
Suddenly, the Iraqi Captain Dar shows up and starts unloading rounds at Rachel and Eric, and they seek cover. We then cut to Jason and Nick, who hear Rachel's call for help and are forced to leave Merwin to face the horrors chasing them alone. Eric and Rachel are on the run when again the earth shakes and Rachel falls down a cliff, but Eric manages to grab her on a climbing rope and is single-handedly keeping her from plummeting into the abyss. He considers cutting the rope to save them both from falling, but ultimately chooses not to cut the rope. Jason and Nick arrive in the nick of time, but soon after, the rope snaps on its own and Rachel plummets into the darkness. It's at this stage when we are paid a visit by the curator once more to check in on our progress. He proclaims how unfortunate it is for Rachel to have fallen into the darkness, strongly implying to us that we have in fact killed her. He also comments on the relationship between Nick and Jason, calling into question how strong their bond really is. The curator then offers some advice, which he deems as being helpful, when in reality you might as well have picked out a page out of Dante's Inferno and placed his finger on a random line with his eyes closed.
Long ago I met a blind poet who impressed upon me these wise words. Long is the way and hard, and out of hell leads up to light. That's all for now.
Are under attack by...
We return to Nick, Eric, and Jason, who regroup in the throne room and try to explain to Eric about the creatures who've been chasing them, but predictably, he doesn't believe their asses. Yet.
Come on.
The group fall into temporary darkness as the diesel generator appears to have been sabotaged by the Iraqi Captain Dar, but Nick and Jason quickly fix it and the group push forward through the corridors, keeping their eyes open for any more surprises. It is here that Jason finds another page from the journal belonging to the long-dead archaeologist Randolph, who writes that he and Mary have realized that the ruins they've discovered are not in fact the ruins of the tomb of Alexander the Great, as Lady Bradshaw led them to believe, but instead it is an ancient temple belonging to the Akkadian despot Naram Sin, who we saw during the prologue. We return yet again to Salim, who is looking for a way out after witnessing the demon get crushed by the falling truck. Salim lifts some of the debris crushing the demon body, only for it to suddenly twitch and spring back to life and initiate a chase with him. He's just hard like that. With nowhere to run or hide, Salim seeks out a weapon to kill the creature. He finds a large jagged metal rod which is sticking out of the truck debris and proceeds to pull it out from the wreck. And, like an absolute madman, Salim gets jumped on by the demon and then impales his metal stake through the heart of the demon, which he now firmly believes is a vampire. The Salim vampire kill count is now at 1. Returning back to the Cuck trio, Jason believes that he can hear Joey's voice coming from one of the tunnels ahead on the surface.
You heard him just now. It can't be.
But Nick vehemently denies that this is impossible, because Joey died in his arms.
Telling you, I saw him die.
As we continue forward, Nick finds yet another page from the Randolph journal, this time writing that he and Mary have found dynamite in the effects of Lady Bradshaw's enforcer, a man named Crow Van Hoyten, and when they have complained to him about the dangers of using the explosives in an ancient dig site, he gave them a stern look and said that they might need it because they found something below. Continuing their cautious advance through the tunnel, the trio is again attacked by the Iraqi Captain Dar. They manage to fight him back, but some falling debris separates Nick from Jason and Colonel Cuck. Nick proceeds alone until he encounters a lone vampire drinking blood from a corpse. But before he can get a closer look, Salim steps from behind him and covers Nick's gob with his palm in order to silence him, while he can explain how they go about killing the vampire together. Nick complies and agrees to flank the vampire with the intent of distracting it long enough for Salim to get in close behind it and plunge his seasoned stake into the vampire's heart. The Salim spear vampire kill count is now up to 2. Nick and Salim share a bonding moment as they speculate as to the nature of the creatures, and it's here that Salim quotes from the Sumerian myth.
In the Sumerian myth, they say the souls of the dead went deep underground to the House of Ashes, where they lived on dust, plagued by the demons of the underworld.
Although Nick is comfy with Salim, he isn't sure how his friend will react to Salim's presence, and so he tells Salim to hide while they link up and pass through. Here, Eric finally sees a vampire body for himself and is finally a believer. The group returns to the throne room and sets up a perimeter with cameras and C4 along the walls of the main corridor. While they continue to do this, Colonel Cuck is performing an autopsy on one of the vampire corpses, and he confirms that the creatures do indeed have a weakness to ultraviolet light. Nick and Jason, still checking the last of the corridors, come upon the catacombs, which our two Sumerian warriors made their last stand in 4,000 odd years ago, and discover yet another page from Randolph's diary, this time writing that after they blew a hole in the rock face, they found a gateway to a strange world below, which was glowing with a green phosphorescence. He suspects that Lady Bradshaw is becoming more reckless, but he is too enamored with what they might find down the glowing chasm to offer up any real resistance. He, along with Crow, construct an elevator as a means of descending the chasm. Jason finds a corpse, drained of its blood, and a large metal tent peg pierced into its chest cavity. Nick convinces Jason to hang on to
those creatures didn't do this. Who did?
Oh no. Buffy?
Who?
Lo and behold, in the next scene we see that Rachel is in fact alive, drenching her way through a giant lake of tasty blood deep within the cave underground. She inspects the rope which was attached to her and sees that it was indeed snapped by itself and was not chopped by Eric. Blood-marinated Rachel is found by one of the vampires, and it gives chase. And out of nowhere, a very pale-looking Clarice re-emerges from her perceived death to rescue Rachel from her hunter. Cut back again to the Cuck trio, who stumbled upon an old radio transmitter, which must have been set up by the archaeologists. But before they can discuss it further, suddenly Undead Joey appears, looking like a human gerbil hybrid with the horns of a little goat. The group scuffle on the edge of a deep chasm, and after failing to get through to their comrade, the Undead Joey pounces on Jason, ready to rip him apart, only to be on the receiving end of a wooden stake, which Jason had held onto from earlier. He plunges it into Joey's heart, staggering him long enough for Colonel Cuck to straight light his ass up with a UV lamp, thus making him go limp and fall into the moor. Back to Rachel and Clarice now, who are poking fun at each other and looking for a way to ascend out of the blood hole. They climb a wall with rope. As they leave the screen, we see a mysterious yet familiar foot appear. At this point, Clarice isn't feeling so good, Mr. Stark. Her skin is ashen, and she lapses into several coughing fits. The pair find a chasm which they must cross to regroup with everyone else, but Clarice's health is deteriorating fast, and after she asks Rachel for an honest answer about her chances of survival, Rachel chooses to be based and red-pilled and tell the truth. She says that she doesn't reckon Clarice will make it. This convinces Clarice to stay behind to prevent her from turning and attacking Rachel in the future. They part ways solemnly. We return to Nick, who has gotten his hands on another page of the Randolph diary, which this time reads that his wife Mary has become sick and is babbling about some kind of winged horrors, while Lady Bradshaw keeps poking and prodding at her with her damnable questions. Salim finally links up back with his Captain Dar, who sees the US trio and decides to assault them. Salim protests, realizing that they need each other's help to survive, but eventually relents when Dar proceeds with his plan anyway. The Americans get the radio working, but accidentally switch to the Slender Man frequency. Which attracts the attention of both the Iraqis and vampires. Eric runs to the temple, but bumps into Dar and Salim, who take him hostage and shoot out the radio from under Nick's hands. Bing, bang, 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 gun battle happens. Bang, 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 bang. Then the vampires advance, and everyone pushes back into the temple and are trying to close the door when suddenly a wild Rachel returns to the group and dun dun dun, more romantic tension. Eric throws down with Nick until Rachel's cool head prevails for the moment. The gang retreats to the throne room and see that the generator is for the third time busted, so the boys hold the door until Rachel fixes it. The vampires finally bust down the big-ass door, and our group bugs out to try and escape down into the catacombs, which we know is already a great idea. The Americans finally catch up to Salim and Captain Dar, and they have a bit of a squabble, but inevitably hear the vampires coming for their asses, and they put their differences aside to get another big-ass door
The
open.
enemy of our enemy is our friend. Move! Come on, man!
Everyone is now inside the sacrificial chamber, preparing for the oncoming vampire assault. A big gun battle ensues. Jason gets snatched by a vampire and dragged away, and Nick follows him, only to bump into the transformed body of none other than the Acadian General Balathu, who has taken on the appearance of a mouldy Granny Smith apple. Balathu grabs Nick by the throat and starts choking him out. Right then we switch perspectives to Salim, who is mowing down vampires left, right and centre, except for the one which impales poor Captain Dar, leaving him in a bad and bloody shape. Salim is then confronted by two vampires advancing. The first leaps onto Rachel and starts mauling her, and the second is bound for him. Salim, rightfully so, shoots the vampire coming for him, leaving Rachel to fend for herself. Eric spots Nick and decides to help Balathu with his tan by shining the UV lamp at him. Nick is tossed aside, only for Eric to take his place, but again, Eric escapes Balathu's clutches with the lamp. Captain Dar tries to crawl away one final time, but gets sucked dry. Nick somehow kills the vampire which grabbed him and links up with Salim. The pair have a familiar argument about whether or not they can trust each other, but eventually Jason relents when Salim recounts how Nick said that the enemy of my enemy is my friend, which now makes the unlikely allies cooperate, just as it did with Balathu and Karoom at the beginning of the game. Now do you see the comparison? Salim and Jason exchange some witty quips while continuing to traverse the ruin.
You got any idea what we're dealing with?
They're vampires.
Not possible.
My father once told me, if something looks like shit and smells like shit, you don't have to taste it to know that it's shit.
Salim finds yet another page of the Randolph diary, which details Marie's undead transformation and Randolph's grievance about how Lady Bradshaw knew what they would find down here all along. Salim and Jason get ambushed by another vampire, but Salim, in classic Chad fashion, makes short work of the creature with his spear, bringing the current Salim vampire kill count to 3. Jason and Salim uncover the prison where Randolph killed his undead wife and proclaim that they must bring down the temple to prevent the horrors from escaping out into the world. Before leaving the area, Jason draws a funny picture on the floor, which will help to guide anyone else alive. The pair push on until they come upon a massive chasm bathed in a growing green light, which Randolph spoke of in his diary. The elevator which the archaeologists installed is still operational. Salim is reluctant at the start, but Jason presses him to get the fuck up on the elevator and get it running so they can take it down into the green, glowing hellscape. It is at this point where the curator pays us another friendly visit, during which he taunts us with a few witty metaphors and puns, and proclaims that
I'll be here to greet your charges as they cross the finishing line, or to bury what remains of them under it.
Before the journey can continue, we are greeted to a flashback of Rachel and Eric's honeymoon, where they stop at the Little Hope Diner, 3 years prior to our character's predicament. The newlyweds are smitten with each other, But Rachel recounts a conversation she had with the cashier inside the diner, who told her,
He said I'll never again be as happy as I am now.
We return to our tale with Nick and Rachel waking up from their respective states of unconsciousness. The pair embrace and share a smooch, just as Colonel Cuck walks in on them. But before they can say anything, a sudden Balathu reappears to give chase to the trio. Balathu catches up to Nick and gives him a friendly foot bump. This prompts Eric to intervene and have a tussle with Balathu, throwing him down a hole while Nick and Rachel pull his ass back up to safety. The trio reaches the room with the cells, where Jason left his funny picture in the floor, and they go, haha, that's funny. This must be Jason's doing. They gain some optimism for about 3 seconds, before finally Nick and Colonel Cuck demand that Rachel chooses one of them, as they might not get another chance. Neither man wants to die like a chump.
I held on to that rope. I knew you'd always be there for me. I want to try us again.
Rachel gives Eric another chance, leaving Nick with the title of Sergeant Cuck. Next scene, we're back with our dynamic duo, Jason and Salim, who emerge from the elevator to find themselves in a giant slimy cavern littered with a green luminescence. They walk past more drained bodies and, as expected, find yet another page of the Randolph diary.
This was all Lady Bradshaw's doing. She knew all along what was down here. She led us to them. I found her below, hunched over the murdered corpse of Van Hoyten. As she turned to face me, I saw that she had changed. My hand fell to the closest weapon I could find, an iron tent peg. I stabbed her with the metal, impaling her in the heart. She died. Unholy screams echoed from deep below, as if answering the sudden release of blood.
As well as corpses, there are hundreds of cocoons which surround the cavern, laying dormant in wait, perhaps for the scent of blood. The cavern doesn't appear natural, as there are very alien-like structures and mechanisms everywhere, which make up the very foundations of the path on which they are currently treading. The biomechanical design reminds me of art inspired by H.R. Geiger, the mind behind the Alien films, and that one Scorn game that came out in October of last year that I played 5 minutes of before I realized it was a puzzle game and stopped playing it because I fucking hate puzzle games. Salim becomes overwhelmed by what he sees in this hell, which prompts him to lay out his mistakes to Jason, to whom he then asks if his conscience is indeed clear. To which Jason responds by recounting the incident that he and Nick went through at the civilian checkpoint a few weeks prior.
Nick and I, we were caught in traffic. Checkpoint had been hit before by suicide bombers. There was a woman. She was carrying a bag. Fuck.
Tell me.
I ordered for her to stop, loud and clear, but she didn't. She just kept on walking. I had to make a call. Nick, he shot her dead.
What was in the bag?
Groceries.
I don't understand. Why didn't she stop?
She didn't hear me. She had fucking headphones on.
Right there, and we find a way to hurt them.
Those fucking things tried to fuck with our heads. They tried to kill us. But you and I, we're both standing. Start believing, Salim. We're gonna get out of here and see the sun again.
Is that what you truly believe?
Hoorah!
What on earth is that sound?
It's a Marine thing.
Oh.
So, does that make me a Marine too?
Let's not get ahead of ourselves, huh?
His relationship improves drastically, and they both proclaim to have each other's backs and swear vengeance against the vampires for screwing with their heads. Along their exploration of the unknown alien structures, they pass a corpse covered in a yellow gooey fluid. We can immediately tell that this is the same fluid that has somehow preserved the man's flesh and part of his brain, as although he is 5,000 years old, the pair hear him moaning and his eyes are twitching. The half-decayed body belongs to that of Kurum, and Salim takes upon mercy to the long-suffering warrior and quickly ends his life and puts him to rest. Eventually, Salim and Jason can see in the distance a giant mega mountain made up of thousands of vampire cocoons and approach carefully to take a closer look. One of the vampires breaks free from its cocoon and attacks the duo, but Nick, Rachel, and Eric save their hides with a noob tube surprise for the creature. The group of 5 are reunited once more and proceed to crawl into a closed-off main cavern for some temporary respite from combat. The group is starstruck by what they see, a star chamber, as they call it.
What is this?
There is lots of gear laying around that clearly indicates that the archaeologists made it there, but before they can explore the cavern, the group do a gear check to see what they have left to blow up the giant vampire mound.
We need a plan.
Fuck those things up and get the fuck out.
Good plan.
Sergeant K, what do we got left?
So we got 8 clips of 5.56 FMJ, 3 40mm high-X rounds, a couple of 9mm pistols, 4 clips between them. We'll make that work. Huh. Plus 2 phosphor rounds. And 1 block of composition C4.
Well, what about the UV lamp?
Took a knock, but I can fix it. Just need a minute.
All in is not enough.
We've also got this.
It's old, unpredictable.
We work with what we got.
Our fuses are shot, but we can use the C4 to detonate them.
Rachel proceeds to explore the cavern after the gear check and discovers some documents written in Mary's handwriting, which indicate the life cycle of the parasitic organism. Rachel also finds the 10th and final page of the Randolph diary. It is a word-for-word copy of the first recording Eric and Rachel uncovered in the throne room. Salim discovers that in the center of the star chamber is a console, which is powered by sounds, which can be produced by running your fingers along the circles embedded within the console. He reads Mary's writings and learns that she deciphered the language made up of musical scales, sonics, as she was a pianist, of course. Salim learns from Mary's research that the beings were once a peaceful race until they suffered some kind of sickness or a plague which turned them into the vampiric creatures of hate and violence they've thus encountered. Salim asks Rachel to help him activate the sonic console, but Rachel goes into a state of sudden illness and collapses upon hearing the sounds produced by the big tubes surrounding the star chamber. It's clear now that she was infected with the parasite earlier, and its presence inside her gives her a temporary vision of the past. She sees that the structure they are in is actually an alien Ark city, which crashed on Earth millions of years ago. She picks up a white phosphorus explosive, intending to kill herself to prevent her transformation by the parasite gestating inside of her, but ultimately loses her nerve. Jason states that there is no alternative but for him to shoot and kill Rachel, an idea which Rachel and everyone else fully disagrees with. Salim interjects and suggests that they put Rachel in one of the fluid-filled cocoons to stop her from turning and then return for her with help when the time is right. Rachel is desperate, so she reluctantly agrees. However, the parasite becomes aggravated, and Eric decides to burn the parasite out by flashing Rachel with the UV light, which amazingly works, and she chucks up the alien parasite and presumably recovers immediately with 0 health complications. Woohoo! The group leave the star chamber and return to the giant cocoon vault, fully intending to plant explosives. All that remains is to decide who goes and who stays.
Fuck it, I'll do it.
Sergeant Cuck, Nick, volunteers to be the one, with Salim and Jason guiding him and giving him directions from afar using binoculars and a walkie-talkie. Nick proclaims that if he doesn't make it, he wants them to blow the charges regardless of his presence. The group agrees and Nick heads into the Nightmare Pit to plant the charges. Nick plants the first dynamite and moves to the next cocoon mound, completely unaware of the sudden undead Balathu, who remains very much undead? Nick reaches the second mound and plants more explosives, but his eyes catch the sight of an even bigger mound, and Jason implores him to ditch the charges and return safely. Nick decides to be the Chad and go for it. While he's planting the final explosives, Salim and Jason spot hundreds of vampires hatching from their respective cocoons and coming down on top of Nick. Jason tells Nick about the dire situation he's in, and also apologizes to him for all the times he's wronged him and for the kill order he gave at the checkpoint. Nick accepts his fate and continues to plant the explosives. Here as players, we must keep Nick's heartbeat steady for a solid minute for him to avoid being spotted too early for him to finish his task. Nick is finally cornered and confronted by the undead Balathu and gives the order to detonate. Each of the mounds goes up in flames, bang 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 bang, but Nick's voice isn't to be heard.
Nick! Answer me, damn it!
Until Eric picks up a faint voice on his comm to realize that Nick is in fact alive. The gang go charging back into the fiery hell to save Nick, who is once again, unsurprisingly, being choked out by the undead Balathu. Until the Giga Chad Doomslayer, Salim, impales Balathu through the heart, finally killing the monster. The Salim vampire kill counter is now at 4. The group are chased out of the vaults by dozens of vampires, and during the chase, Salim gets separated from the rest of the group, but they don't realize this until they reach the elevator platform. Jason contacts Salim, who says that he is surrounded by too many vampires to continue, and he needs help. Basically, the whole ass group agrees to leave Salim behind, with Eric even saying that he isn't one of them. Ugh. Jason refuses to side with the group and decides to dive back into hell to rescue his unlikely brother in arms. While Jason distracts a vampire with his gunfire, Salim the Slayer impales his 5th vampire of the day. The moment of climax is finally reached when a vampire sneaks up behind Jason, nearly killing him, but the creature never stood a chance against Salim the Slayer, who, like a dead-ass Olympic gold medalist, straight up throws his spear like a javelin into the chest of the creature and then finishes it off with the classic impale.
Seriously, just throw that thing at me.
I did.
Let's get out of here.
The Salim vampire kill count is now at 6. Jason and Salim laugh about the absurdity of the situation, and all 5 members make it back to the lift shaft and get on the elevator. On the way up, Salim becomes an honorary Marine.
Hoorah!
Jason and Nick ascend a rope back up to the main chamber, and Eric and Rachel are last up. But before they get a chance to do so, a wild undead Clarice jumps out of nowhere and attacks Eric. But Rachel quickly proves her feminine dominance as she kicks vampire Clarice in the face, and she falls down the ravine into the dark abyss. The group of 5 make it back up to the main temple chamber and are in sight of the sunlight poking through the surface. They see an exit via the statue of the Akkadian Emperor and ascend it to the surface, and salvation. The entire group are overjoyed and in a state of disbelief that they have made it out of the hell in one piece. Everything seems so good. Almost too good.
No. Not again.
Dun 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 dun! Solar eclipse happens, and the vampires emerge onto the surface, forcing the survivors into one of the shepherd's homes. They shore up the defenses and prepare for a final stand against the vampires for 6 minutes until the eclipse passes. Everyone is on low ammo, and Salim is stabbing like a madman, but there are boxes of flares which the group uses in conjunction with combat knives. They form a badass looking circle, which each of their backs facing the inside in a defensive formation, and we as the player prepare to defend the survivors. Rachel gets the first attack in, followed by Eric, followed by Nick, followed by Salim, and then to Jason. Everyone manages to fight off the vampires in a circular fashion, until it appears as though they'll be overwhelmed, but at that very moment the eclipse ends and the vampires on the surface burn to piles of ash. Our 5 survivors are finally safe and feel the sun on their faces. Salim says a heartfelt goodbye to Jason.
Good luck, brother. You wish Zane a happy birthday from me.
Thank you, Jason. Goodbye, my friend.
And he walks into the sunset to be with his son. A helicopter arrives hours later and rescues the 4 members of the assault team. We are visited a final time, as promised, by the curator, who gives us a highly sarcastic clap and congratulates us for keeping every one of the 5 characters alive.
And in itself can make a heaven of hell a hell of heaven. Bravo! It appears your charges have emerged from their hell in one piece, although this ordeal will continue to haunt them for the rest of their lives. I look forward to our next encounter. Perhaps I'll choose a story that's a little more homely next time, somewhere you'll be guaranteed of a decent night's sleep. Rest assured, wherever it is, you'll find it extremely hard to leave. Until the next time. You know the way out.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the interactive drama video game, The Dark Pictures Anthology, The House of Ashes. Like and subscribe if you'd like to see a summary for each of the episodes, but you already know I'll be making them regardless. Have a great day or night, everyone. Bye-bye.